My name is Wade Grant, and I thank you for inviting me. My traditional name is Tsawat Waleno. I come from the Musqueam people whose traditional territory we stand on today, whose traditional territory encompasses what is now called the city of Vancouver. And I've always been very involved with organizations such as this, because as you look at me, you may look at me and say, he doesn't look First Nations. He doesn't look Native. Well, there's a reason why I don't look First Nations. You probably think I look more Asian too, right? My grandfather immigrated to Canada in the 1920s. He was Chinese from the south of China. Hong Tim Hing, Gordon Hong. And I'll get into that a little bit later on, about how my grandmother and my grandfather came together. Because I think it's very, very telling as to why we are here today, to see two communities come together. The first peoples of Canada and the newest peoples of Canada. It is because of our ancestors, our elders, those that came before us, that this country is so great. That this country has become what it is today. For those that don't know, the Musqueam people have lived here for 4,000 years. We say since time immemorial. And when we say since time immemorial, we say that because we have stories and legends that date back far enough that we don't even remember. Anthropologists date us 4,000 years, but we say we've been here longer. We've lived in this place called Vancouver now, down by the mouth of the Fraser River, which is just south of where we stand. That's where our main village is. We've lived there, we've welcomed people. We've always welcomed people to our territory. It's always been our duty to welcome them to this territory. We were the first line of defense and the first people to greet those that came down the coast from Haida Gwaii, came across the water from Vancouver Island. And we did that on an ongoing basis. And then in the 1700s, a gentleman by the name of Captain Narvaez landed at what he called Langara Point, which is now Point Grey. And once again, the Musqueam people, like many First Nations, said, we welcome you to our territory. And we opened up our hearts and our minds, become sharing. We shared the land, we shared the resources. And it was an ongoing relationship for many, many years. But then the European settlers that came after Captain Narvaez and after Captain George Vancouver realized, hey, there's a lot of land here. There's a lot of resources here. We can get rich. We can settle this place. But there's one problem. First Nations people lived in this territory. What are we going to do? How can we do this? And there was a gentleman by the name of Duncan Campbell Scott, who was the Indian agent, or the Department of Indian Affairs, who said, we have to solve the Indian problem, which meant we were a problem, we were a nuisance. So what they did is they put us on reserves. In BC, the no trees were ever signed. So in order for us to become good Canadian citizens, as Duncan Campbell Scott put it, a number of different initiatives were put into place. Tens of thousands were taken from their homes. When they were of age, they would be taken from their homes, put in schools that were 500, 600 kilometers away, told they can't speak their language, they can't speak their culture, they can't practice their culture, and if they did, they would be punished for it. They wanted them to become assimilate into the greater community. In fact, if you look back at the documentation, it was to kill the Indian in the child. That's what they called it. And that's where the miseducation comes, and the miscommunication, and the misunderstandings that we find with First Nations people in this country, is that from a very young age, we don't get taught about the history. We get taught a little bit about, when I was in school, a little bit about the Plains Indians. Lived in teepees, wore headdresses, ate pemmican, but that's all I remember from high school. You don't get taught about residential schools. You don't get taught about potlatches. You don't get taught about the great chiefs. People talk about, well, it's so far in the past. All these things in the past, let's move forward, let's move on. Well, we can't forget about those sorts of things because it wasn't so long in the past. So there's a lot of healing to do. And I look at the new generations, the younger generations, and the new Canadians that come. And I know we are the face of this country as we move forward. Our ancestors built this country up. They built the railways. They farmed the land. That's what my grandfather did. He farmed down in Musqueam. And it's incumbent upon us to come together in dialogue, to talk about our histories, to talk about our similarities. Because I know when people come to this country, they probably get the same amount of education about First Nations as I got when I went to school, which was zilch, zero. And only then, through the dialogue, when I come and speak at events like this, or I sit on the Vancouver Dialogues Project, which is a project that's very near and dear to my heart as the chair there, where the City of Vancouver and the Province of British Columbia have helped bring together three very distinct communities, the First Nations, the Aboriginals, urban Aboriginals, and the new Canadians, to come and talk about dialogue about who you are, where you come from, answer questions. We do know that we're going to move forward and create a great country, the greatest country in the world. That's why I know a lot of you came here. That's why my grandfather came here. And that's why I love to stand here, because I know we can do it. And I thank you all. I thank you all for the work that you do to make sure that we carry that message forward. We carry the message of reconciliation and hope for First Nations, for new Canadians, for Aboriginal people, but more importantly for the memory of my grandfather and my grandmother and their colleagues and the people that came with them. So I know as we move forward, we have a lot of work to do, but associations such as this are paving the way for a new beginning. And I thank you.